wait a minute. Wait a minute. Have I been living like a background character in my whole life? Is that how I've been living? Just vibing with no direction of where I'm going. Root shock. That is your consciousness working right there. Let's dive into this. Thank you so much, Thinkers. Thank you so much for your engagement in the comment section. That has been the fuel or one of the things that keeps me going. It gives me that joy that the conversation we have on here is actually creating value to people out there. Thank you so much. So in the comment section, one of the videos that was done couple of weeks back. I can't remember exactly when, but we're talking about unconsciousness. That is what controls your life. We talked about how your unconsciousness controls your life the most. And someone had dropped in the comment section that how do you identify or how do you even get into your consciousness and how do you even know that you are in your consciousness? And that is what created this discussion. One of the things that was mentioned in the last video, we talked about unconsciousness a lot. And unconsciousness is just like the memory that you have stored in your brain that helps you react, that helps you respond, that helps you live life without having to learn those things again, right? It's like the light is on, but you're not the one really driving it. And one of the examples that was given in that video is when you wake up in the morning, you need to do your regular activities like brushing your teeth, like walking in the house in the dark, and you don't have to relearn all those things. It is your unconsciousness that is bringing back those things that you've learned and making you do those activities, even if you're not exactly conscious of what you're doing. You still get to do those things without having to learn them all over again. So let's talk about consciousness. What is consciousness? Really, it is not that deep. It is not something consciousness is not what we'll be looking far and beyond before we get to that state. It is very direct. Consciousness simply means that you knowing that you're thinking while you are thinking. It's just more like a state of self-awareness. It is a state where you're able to ask yourself questions about your thoughts, where you're able to pause, observe, and choose. That is your consciousness. A moment where you're able to ask your thoughts or your thinking that is that really me? Or am I reacting right? Or am I doing what is right? Where you're able to ask these of questions, it is your conscious state. Now that we understand what consciousness really means, right? Or the state of consciousness, how do you get yourself into the state of consciousness? The road to consciousness doesn't start with meditation or a smooth road like that. The road to consciousness is typically chaos. Sometimes, I'm not saying most of the time, but it comes with when you just experience a heartbreak, when you have a toxic job, or when you are in traffic, and you know how traffic can be in Lagos in particular. When you're in traffic and you're yelling, you're reacting, and all of a sudden you ask yourself, why am I even reacting like this? Or why is it that when I'm asked a question related to this, I react this way? Or why do I always get someone like this, like a partner or a lover like this in my relationship? That is where you are on the road to consciousness. When you're noticing all these patterns, like you're dating the same emotionally unavailable person, like you snap at people when it's not even needed and you blame it on being tired or being tired or exhausted from work or even from school, you just snap at people. These are patterns that shows that you are asking yourself, you're getting yourself in the state of consciousness. You're still doing them anyways, but you're just asking questions. Well, this feels abnormal. It used to be normal, but why is this really normal? Why am I doing all those things? Sometimes you just look at your family and you're thinking, wait a minute, what is this dysfunction that is happening in this family? It's not normal. The worst part of it is you becoming aware of those behavior, but you're still doing them anyway. That is what is called the consciousness mess. It's really messing up with you, messing up with your brain. One thing I can tell you that the consciousness mess, or the consciousness, let me put it that way, is it can be frustrating because your brain is doing blast, blast, blast everywhere. You're feeling, what is going on here? Am I doing the right thing? Is this dysfunction okay? Why am I reacting to this person like this? Why am I doing this? You begin to ask questions. So it can actually be frustrating in that state. But relax. It is actually a good thing because growth is actually in there. Yeah, like I said, growth lives in there. That is where your consciousness starts, and then you begin to you don't lose yourself. You begin to grow and begin to ask more questions. And as such, you begin to ask questions before you react. You ask questions or breathe before arguing. Take a deep breath. Pause a little before you react or before you respond. You're not just responding based on your unconsciousness. You're reflecting and thinking about your responses before you respond. You're also asking questions about your choices, which is also very important, right? Yeah. So that begins to be your conscious state. We talked about the consciousness, and then you begin to move to the conscious state where you begin to act on it. Before you respond, you ask questions. Before you make a choice, you're taking your time. You're not just making impulse choices. You're asking yourself relevant questions before choices has been made. Remember, we had said that your unconsciousness is not something bad. It is good for you because it helps you do some things on autopilot, right? But when you begin to do them on autopilot, there are some things that you really need to ask yourself questions on before you make those decisions. That is where your consciousness needs to come in. I'm glad to tell you that your consciousness is not perfection. It's not a place you feel like, oh, now I'm in my conscious state, I'm perfect, everything is. No, it's all about the presence. It's all about the self-awareness that you've been able to put in your life to control some certain things or important things of your life. It's not about fixing everything. It is more about seeing clearly. It is that moment when you begin to understand that, oh, I don't have to be slave to my needs or my fears or my trauma loops anymore. I can choose how I show up, and that is where the power lies. So there was a time I was having a conversation with a client, and we're having this conversation, and it seemed like this client likes to be very defensive in every argument. And it seemed like it is always someone's fault. This person, it is not his or her fault. Let's put it like that. But it is someone else's fault in every situation, or mostly all situations. And I asked, why do you need to win? Why do you feel the need to win so badly? Why are you afraid? What are you really afraid of that will happen if you fall on the wrong side, or you are the one at fault, or you find yourself at fault in an argument or in a situation? And that conversation went that way, and we moved away from that. A couple of months later, I had met this client again, and what this client said, what you said to me that day actually changed me. And I was like, oh, what it is? And this client related the situation. It helped the clients to regain the consciousness of, why do I act the way I act? Why do I have to be the one that should win every conversation? And that is where the power is. That is where growth is, and that is where consciousness lives. On a final note to my commenter, so now you know what your consciousness really means. Consciousness isn't a vibe. It is a war. It is not a war where they do. No, that is not what you're saying. It is a war between your higher self and your old programming. The programming that has been there, where you begin to ask yourself questions. Is this normal? Is this the right thing to do? Taking a pause and things like that. It is the war between yourself and old programming between who you want to be and who you have been trained to be. That is the war we're talking about. But the more you choose awareness, the more freedom you feel. Because really, this is a journey of self awareness and self improvement. And when you finally breathe without guilt, love without attachment, and walk away without any chaos, that is when you know you are finally awake in your consciousness. And just before we wrap up, let's talk about the Legeno section. There is a lot of research ongoing to back this up, but while we wait for that, let's talk about this. Consciousness is not the single thing that happens in your brain. It is the network of neural activity that lights up when you are aware, when you introspect, or observing yourself. Neuroscience says that consciousness isn't magic. Not be magic. They actually believe that it is measurable, though there isn't any research or data to back that up. But scientists are currently working on research or scientific backup that can actually map out how waking up in your mind really looks like. Doesn't that sound amazing? I'm really looking forward to that scientific outcome or backup to what consciousness or how weakness looks like in our brain. And if I do get anything on that, I'll definitely share with you, my big thinkers out there. Trust me. If you like what you hear, if you like how this channel is bringing that awareness as to you, the way you act, the way you do things in general, human behavior, and how you can also make the right choices in your relationship as a young adult. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your community. At this point, I'll say bye to you all and talk to you next time. Bye for now. Bye.